Hello and welcome to Run It Live technical series on Forcepoint Next Generation Firewall. My name is Anas Shunnak, Forcepoint Sales Engineer in Saudi Arabia. Run It Live is a series of technical sessions that will help you to build your own lab environment in your laptop, desktop, or VMware ESX server. In this session, we will cover the installation of the Next Generation Firewall on your virtual environment. We will be using 2 virtual CPU cores, 2 GB of RAM, 3 network interfaces. Ethernet 0 will be connected to VMnet 9, which will represent the internal interface. Ethernet 1, which will be connected to the NAT interface and represent the external interface of the next generation firewall, and Ethernet 2, which will represent the DMZ and connected to VMnet 7. The operating system that will be selected during the setup will be Linux 64-bit. The IP addresses assigned to the interfaces will be 10.0.0.254/24 for Ethernet 0 and will represent the internal interface. Ethernet 1 will be assigned an IP address, but that depends on the VMware workstation configuration. We will see that shortly when we assign an IP address to this interface. And no IP address will be assigned to Ethernet 2. Now we will start by creating a new virtual machine for the virtual firewall. We'll be selecting the default settings. For the operating system, we'll select Linux 64-bit. We'll give it a name. Two processors are enough. For the memory, you can use 1 GB or 2 GB, depend on the resources available in your machine. Keep everything in default, and 8 GB of hard disk is enough. Now we need to do customization to add another 2 network interfaces as discussed. The first network interfaces will be in VMnet 9, the same as the SMC server, and Ethernet 3 will be in VMnet 7. We can keep the second one on NATing. We'll select the ISO image for the virtual firewall. I'll be increasing the RAM on my virtual machine because I have enough resources. And we are done. Now we will start the virtual machine to start the installation process. Once we are seeing the accepting the agreement, we'll click Q and yes. We'll select full installation, then yes. It will start the actual installation of the virtual machine. It will reboot one time, and after that we can start with the initial setup. Now on the home screen of the SMC, we will right click, select a new firewall, single firewall. We will give it a name, NGFW. For the DNS server, we can use the Quad 9 DNS server. Now we'll go to the interfaces, right click new, layer 3 physical interface, interface 0 with the zone of internal, and interface 1 with the zone of external, and interface 3, which is the interface ID 2 with the DMZ zone. Now we'll give an IP addresses for the interface 0, 10.0.0.254. It will be using the default subnet mask 24-bit. Interface 1, now we need to assign an IP address. Now to know exactly which IP address we'll be assigning here, it depends on the VMware workstation. We will go to the Edit, Virtual Network. Now select the NAT interface, which is NAT 8, and it is 192.168.116 subnet. So we'll select 192.168.116.100 for example, with the default subnet mask. Interface 2 will not assign any IP address for it. Now we'll go to the routing. For interface 1, we will add a router. Select a new router. We will name it router 192.168.116.2, which is the IP address we saw when we checked the network configuration of the NAT interface. And this will be the default gateway for the external interface. We will right click on that router and select set as default route. So this is the default route for our next generation firewall. We will save it. Now close this window and we can see that the firewall is created and it's a gray color. We will right click, go to configuration and save initial configuration. We'll select the local time zone, the correct one based on your city and country. We'll select Asia, Riyadh. Now we'll click on view details to see the one-time password that we will use during the initialization of the next generation firewall over the command line. I'll copy it on a notepad. Okay, so here is it. Now let's go back for the first point next generation firewall and let's write Y to start the configuration. At any point in time, you can run this initial configuration wizard using the command sg-reconfigure. Now we'll select the role of the firewall. It is a firewall VPN, which is the next generation firewall role. Here we will be selecting also the same time zone, which will be Asia Riyadh. We'll give a host name. For example, let's see here if I put a space or underscore, what I'll get. I'll give a password for the root account, so I can connect using SSH or direct on the firewall. So it's not accepting this name, it should be alphanumeric or using a dash is accepted. Now for the interfaces, we will select interface 0 as the management interface, which is connected to the local network and is reachable to the SMC server. On the next window, we will enter the node IP address, which is the IP address of the internal interface, /24. There is no gateway here. And we will select contact the SMC management server. We will put the IP address of the SMC 10.0.0.1 and we will be writing the one-time password. Let's confirm the interfaces are correct. So the SMC is connected to VMnet 9. So this should be the same as the internal interface, which is Ethernet 0 for the virtual firewall. Okay, and click finish. And here we go. We'll accept the fingerprint and it's successful. We can run IP space A to get the IP address configuration, and we can test ping on the SMC server. So it's successful. Now we can go back to the SMC and close this window, and we can see now it gets the orange color. Now it's waiting to assign the license for this firewall and to create an initial policy to be deployed on this firewall. So we'll go to configuration. We'll go to policies and create a new policy. We can create it under the firewall default template. So firewall policy, we will name it NGFW HO policy. And it will be empty, but it will inherit all the configuration in the firewall template policy. So we will not add any rule for the time being. So we can close it. Now we can go in configuration, under administration, go to licenses, all licenses. Here's the license for the NG firewall. It's unassigned. We will right click, bind to this node of firewall. So it's successful. Now we can push the initial policy to the firewall. So we'll click upload policy. We will select a policy. This is the one we have created. OK. And it's pushed successfully. Now we'll wait for a while until it becomes green. So it's now become green. So let's close all tabs and go back to home window to check that the firewall now is up and running. This concludes the NG firewall setup. I hope you had an informative session. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.